Mr. Oakes, have you um, recently caught yourself uh, having a question and then
Yes.
having to correct the habit of going to a fellow human being that you would normally ask that question of? And then you're, oh, yeah, we've got AI here. Let me go ask there instead.
I've got to say no, because I have typically run my questions through other filters before I go to a human for an ask,
Okay.
particularly for maybe if there's like an extreme domain specialty, right? Like a accountant or an attorney, but I have I had some accounting related ponderings toward the end of the year, as one does, and I asked Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini via Google search and used those things to perform additional Google searches to try to refine the information I was looking for before I even went to email my tax accountant in this case, who is very thoughtful, polite, extremely responsive via email. I will ask a 2 sentence question and she will respond with like a 2 page thing. And I'm like, that's not sustainable. I wanted a like, I tried to phrase the question as like a, if it's easy, say yes or no. If it's not, we'll just talk about it later. Not, you should spend 30 minutes writing an email back to me. Um, so my behavior is probably atypical, I think, in that respect.
Uh, is it fair to call that research?
In that case, the example there I gave, it was not research in the context of a purchase decision, but I would say that it was lowercase r research generally, um, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to get to today. It was an interesting conversation with Nico this morning because I have caught myself um, like go to ask something of somebody in Slack and then remember like I have access to AI
Yeah.
that can probably answer it for me. And uh, that convenience, like once you get over that hump of actually once it becomes a trusted resource, right? That I think that's the key of like you
Yes.
go to the people that you trust to do the research, especially when it comes to, I mean, we've been hearing that forever, right? And we're hearing that grow recently. Like it's not like we don't have the owned real estate and power over this buying process that we may have once had. And that if you're not in the conversation, in the community, in the Reddits, on LinkedIn, like all these places where this trusted information is being shared, you're not a part of the conversation. You don't exist during the research process, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in the boy, I mean, you touched on so many critical things there, but one that I think is really meaningful, we talked about in our last session. We talked about the audience stage of the value path when speaking from the perspective of a business. You have people's some small slice of people's attention who are paying attention to you because they are trying to figure out if you fit in their world at all and like what's going on. But there's an aspect of this researcher stage and the activities that happen there that when you pass kind of abstractly from the audience stage into the researcher stage, there is um, there is a dynamic. I don't have a name for this, but I recognize it in myself in research patterns where um, whether it's for a purchase or often it is like a pre-filtering of I don't know the right questions to ask, and I didn't even with Google used to be able to say, hey, is there a name for the thing that does this in this context, and here's my need and whatever, and Google maybe would be able to turn up a blog post or something for you, or a Reddit post. And that used to be the kind of thing that in the research stage you did have to go to a person to unpack that murky question, to say like, okay, you're saying, you're using this phrase, and I think what you actually mean is something totally different in this context, but you don't know a lot about this area yet. You're still learning. And so you don't know all of the terms. And so you can't phrase a question in a way that Google can return you a great answer. But AI can, because of it can decode mostly the murkiness of that language, can actually bring your question into a realm where it makes more sense. It can essentially like translate your beginner's question into the right terms, so that you can start to get uh, phrase and ask the right questions. And that used to be something that you could only do if you knew the right person to ask.
Yeah. And I think that gives me a good avenue to share my screen here as I look at these words on the screen. Like supporting self-directed discovery. The first step for most businesses, in my opinion, is that the buyers want the self-directed discovery, whether you want them to or not, right? Like there is no path to forcing your directed discovery like on them. And I think you just gave a great example, because we think this for everybody. As soon as they ask me about the content I do, and we start to go towards audience and who's your target, it's like, look, everybody's in the gap. This is a very complex scenario. The chances that I know how people talk about HubSpot and their business in all these different scenarios, like the work I would have to do, and in doing so, target that well, that also shuts everybody else off because they don't use those words,
Right.
right? It's like this problem awareness point that we need to get to, right? To help people understand what language to use to even have a chance at solving their problem, asking the right questions.
Yes.
AI is way better than that. Than like this is what people are trying to do when we've got these like focus groups and like, how do you talk about it? How do you talk about it? Like all the work that went in, like it's a heavy lift. When you can do that,
Yeah.
obviously that's really valuable, but the effort it takes now in the face of people not wanting to spend time on that stuff, like doing the work, like unless you have loyal following already, right? So it's a cycle. And now AI shows up, makes it so easy for them to just like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing right now, right? They might have just seen my page that says AI native transformation, but if they don't call it that, when
Right.
I send the email that says AI native transformation on it, I got spam. I get that out of here. Like,
Right.
right.
Yeah. I mean, how much, just to illustrate that, I mean, I don't know how many times I have overheard in both personal and business contexts somebody doing research, whether that's looking at product information on Amazon, or reading reviews, or looking at Airbnb, or looking at a B2B SaaS company's website, and actively voicing the frustration. I don't want to talk to anybody, or have to search a ton of things, or um, watch all of these videos. I just want to know X, right? Like, whether that, sometimes that is something that is actually complex and is hard to convey, and it would be a real challenge or disservice for the company to put forward in simple terms on a website. Not in the case of Amazon product listings, obviously, um, but the um, it feels simple to the buyer, because they understand their context and they maybe don't recognize the complexity of the business needing to understand that context in order to serve them effectively. But AI can, or maybe let's say chat models like Claude and ChatGPT, firstly, can help service that self directed buyer research phase and really expedite and facilitate it and produce better outcomes for all involved if everybody can kind of talk to each other.
Yeah. And that's, I think, like, they don't want to watch a lot of videos until they do want to watch all of the videos, right?
Right.
And that's
Or
like,
sometimes they're like, I'll watch the videos, but you've got 50 or 20-minute videos here. And what I want to know right now is which one should I watch for where I'm at and what I want to know. And there are times where I have pulled transcripts from all of those videos, run them through AI, and said, I'm trying to find this information. Which of these videos do I look at? I'm not kidding. I've done this more than a handful of times. And it says, it's this video. I'm like, great. And then I go watch that one. And if I get what I need out of it, I'm like, okay, I'll come back to these other ones later. And I do. But, like just the orientation cost of me trying to figure out where the information that I need is out of all of that material. It's good material. I love it. Great. Keep producing that content. It's so valuable. But it's failing to meet me where I am in that research process.
right. And this gets to the heart of the importance of separating these two stages, because the transition point is very much out of your control, but you have to find a way to serve it, because this gets to the point of like the debate between how long the videos need to be. Oh, people have goldfish like attention spans, but then they'll
Right.
spend 8 hours on Netflix in a row,
Right.
right? And what that is like, we need to serve the curiosity, right? Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's the word that I've been thinking about. Let me
Right.
click on this video. But then
Right.
and when you hook them, and this is where people put so much work into the hooks, and like, how do we get them to click and watch the whole minute? Like all of the production effort into that. Then I'm like, all right, I want to learn more. Like, where do I go do that? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I got to talk to somebody. Like, it, and usually in making that video, like the content exists somewhere,
Yeah.
right? We just don't think about this part. It's like, oh, we got them interested. Surely they'll book a meeting now,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And to get to this purposeful investigation, right? To
Yes.
to enable this part, right? Like the confidence to ask the right questions, because it doesn't, like you mentioned, if you don't know which questions you're trying to answer, you might enjoy the 20-minute video, but it didn't land the way it needed to advance like your understanding of the situation.
Yeah, for sure. Boy, I keep saying this. There's so much there that we can drill down into. I mean, the one thing that might be helpful to clarify is that, and push on a little bit, is that we have this researcher stage of the value path, and from the perspective of implementing a, if you will, sales and marketing program or process that better serves how people journey from having never heard of you to being a happy, satisfied customer who has achieved an outcome that they came to you and forked over money for. These phases, implementing these phases, we have to recognize and make a whole bunch of business and system level decisions, automations, categorization. We have to change our reporting. We've got to do all kinds of things to implement, right? They are, there's the business toward the prospective customer perspective. There is also the customer toward the perspective, or the prospective customer toward the business perspective on that journey. And with what you showed there in that slide is that ultimately the like researcher stage, capital R researcher, when somebody enters that, ultimately it's the that purposeful investigation, right? That is like an intent change in the heart and mind of the buyer or buyers who are on this journey. And that can absolutely be something that flits in and out. Today, they are in researcher. Next week, they're not. A month from now, they are again, right? As they are, I say these journeys are more like pinball than bowling, right? There are tension, our constraints, our priorities are bouncing all over the place. And sometimes they can keep that ball in play and sometimes not. But what we are trying to do here is make sure that our capital R researcher stage and the things that we do to support them align with how our prospective buyers view that research process. And that's thorny because the activities that happen in the researcher stage are often recognizable but overlap a great deal with hand raiser and audience, and often even downstream stages of that journey as well, where in self-serve buying decisions especially, where being in the research stage doesn't just mean I have questions and I'm trying to get answers. That is something that people are doing. They are also trying to define terminology that they don't recognize, or realizing like, oh, I've been calling this category of product or this solution or this goal or this metric by a different name than it's actually called by people who do this thing, right? There's all of this like orientation and learning things that happen here. But that's something that happens also if you are a product-led growth business and somebody is creating accounts, setting things up, trying out the free option of your software product to see how it works and get the team's input, and they're learning terminologies and they're bringing other people in, right? But that is actually, depending on your sales process, that can actually be value creation, right?
Yeah. You're
In
using the
sale level.
product to do the
Yeah.
research at that point,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
because especially in HubSpot, a great example of this, like the words in HubSpot are different, and it's very hard to watch a video or like the research methods that you might use to understand exactly how a product works and exactly how to use it for your business when you can just get in there. And this is like the whole thing of product led growth, like just come in free, like free access, like click around, like, because that's really in those cases like how you start to understand which
Right.
questions you might want to be asking and how it works, and just this immerse yourself like in this environment to get to the understanding needed to even talk to others like on your team about it,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. Like how I and can I questions, are like qualifying filters that buyers use during this research stage, right? And if somebody is asking, you know, this is nonsense these days, but old questions used to be like, can I integrate with HubSpot or QuickBooks or any other software tool that they use? Can I integrate with my ERP? Do you integrate with Google Docs? Whatever. Those are questions, and those questions there can be extremely technically detailed versions of those questions that happen during hand raiser when a CTO or somebody from the IT or dev team is on the sales call. And it can also be a VP or a director who just needs to say, who has a list, and they just need to pull everybody off the list who doesn't say we integrate with tool that you use or obscure tool. And they're looking at it from a checkbox standpoint versus somebody who's looking at it from an implementation requirement standpoint, right? And those questions, again, they overlap in that their specificity is what starts to tell them apart. But that's how you effectively support the research stage of this journey.
Yeah. Uh, in like you just shared one matrix of like different roles of the process across departments, right? In that case, it was CTO or IT, right? But as I was going through this, like the different levels of the org, like in terms of individual contributors, managers, executives, they are asking different questions. They are doing different types of research. And that's where, I mean, we see this all the time with HubSpot, especially like either you'll get an individual contributor champion, like coming in, like, oh, this is going to be like great, right? What do they need to answer these questions and like support their understanding?
Right.
And in both cases, like what we want to get to, and the reason they get so granular is you don't have control over how they understand their problem and how they view you in the context of their life and their work, right? And
Right.
if they can't get there, then they can't give it to anybody else on their team. And so classically, if we were to force them to talk to us to answer like, all right, individual contributor, marketing manager, um, yeah, let's have a conversation. But you know what? We're not going to get very far unless we get your CEO or your CMO on the call. So it would be great if you could invite them, right? And guess what? They don't have any language available to even approach that person to bring them into this call. They're probably trying to avoid it at all costs, even though they know they need that person's buy-in at some point. What we can control is understanding that these different levels are involved and that if we really do want to support that person bringing, and it goes both ways, right? Sometimes executives come in and say, oh man, we need to get HubSpot for lead management, and they will just buy it, right? If they do have that control, and then they're like trying to implement it, and then nobody else understands what's going on, and implementation has failed, right? The sooner we get to this up front, where we get to common language, we get to common understanding, like that's where success is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the whole this is we're being both a little bit abstract and overly specific, but the whole name of the game in the research stage is trying to understand for your specific segments in your prospective customers that you want to help improve their world, whether that's selling them a CRM, whether that's something that you're selling them on Amazon or whatever, is figuring out for those segments and the stakeholders in those purchases. If it's one person in one segment, fine, but if it's like executive, manager, and IC, and that's just for one market segment or segment of customers or use cases, and you have five, you also have to, you know, do your diligence on that. But is figuring out how that transformation of passive observation to, you know, the intent of conducting active research, even if it's intermittent, how you enable these people who are part of that research process and sales process in a like meaningfully coordinated and connected approach, right? An SDR does not want to get on a call with an IC who is trying to figure out like, is this system going to integrate like our requirements specify? Those are two people, both of the people on that call are on the wrong call, right? The IC needs different information than the SDR needs, and they have different goals. But way that we typically serve an IC who is looking at detailed information in order to just even pre-qualify potential solutions to go further on, or their boss has said, I think the exec's just going to buy system X, see if that's going to be a disaster, right? That is absolutely research, and we see that more often than we would hope. Um, like they're like, oh great, I gotta like sign up for a demo or like and hope they can answer my technical questions, or I've got to get a free account or a trial account and or go into the developer documentation and try to figure it out. But I'm an admin, not a developer, right? Like that's not well supported. And if they do raise their hand, because that's the only path, it would be the next step in the value path, and get on STR, they're like, oh, we can have a conversation with the sales engineer about that requirement. But yeah, I assure you, we integrate with System X. It might be by a Zapier only. But get your, who else needs to be involved in this decision? Let's get on a call and we'll go into detail about that, right? Like they're both running the right playbook for their role, mostly. But we have not solved for what the research process and requirements for that individual contributor are. And we could run out the playbook, because there are going to be similar failures for both of those other roles. We just haven't recognized like what those needs are and how the activities, and therefore like the sources of information, the kinds of questions, are different for all of those roles, right? Like all three of those roles may use a chat model as part of their research. They're going to be asking drastically different questions. If they, is an executive going to go to Reddit? Maybe. Is an IC? Much more likely. Is an executive going to ask a colleague? You bet they are. Is an IC? Maybe if they know a colleague that they have a relationship with that lichen who works on one or both of the systems in play. My observation is, ICs in that role are often more technical and are like, let's figure out the exact requirements for my situation and drill down into the tools, right? And so like we need to be able to serve all those audiences. We need to understand all of those different aspects of research for them.
Yeah. Oh man. I love doing content with this group. Like it just reveals everything. We're revealing all of the gaps and the patterns and understanding why we are where we are. Like when you mentioned, we're probably just going to buy X, right? Like phrases like nobody's getting fired for buying IBM, like come to mind. And we are in those situations because we haven't done the work to help people do their own work and make it easy to understand. Maybe I don't have to go with the market leader, like the safe play, right?
Right. Or what I used last time, right? Or what's made for our, some antiquated solution that's built for our industry.
Yes. And to that point, even AI, right? This is where just understanding this is all an active conversation. And when you get to points like that, the AI training data knows about that. Nobody got fired for IBM, for buying IBM or whatever, like in our case, Salesforce, right? And to show how deep this goes, right? And like when you do the granularity and understand what the problems are, you get to break through this stuff. But at some point, and this again, like if you let the brand, in this case, the name of the software, HubSpot, do the attraction for you, right? Like people will be dealing with, and you run into this, right? Like I have this data issue. We're working on a help desk solution. All these things that HubSpot as a platform now can help with, right? But this, I'm trying to dig into this so much. And what what Claude shared last week, the HubSpot bias problem is a training data issue, not a documentation issue. Every AI system, because every human has been trained on millions of pages where HubSpot equals marketing, sales, CRM. That mental model is so deeply embedded that explicit documentation gets treated as interesting exception rather than operating reality. The bias reasserts itself the moment there's any ambiguity. And I'll add, like, the gap, the uncertainty gap is what's happening when an executive, anybody, like, takes a step back. I don't understand what's on the screen right now. And you can replace like interesting exception and like whatever your marketing materials or message is.
Right.
If it's not hitting, I take a step back and I start to ask the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is going to come back with whatever that, in this case, mental model is. Like, oh, HubSpot doesn't do that. I know you're trying to tell me it does, but I'm not getting any support anywhere else. And wow, like, so powerful in terms of like it's this cycle that I'm trying to figure out how to break through, and I'm making progress, because what's sitting right next to there is a need that will make the sales process go dramatically faster when you can break through this misunderstanding of how they're like understanding what you're saying. And what Claude told me to do here. Any guesses? I'll ask
Well,
how to
well,
how to avoid this situation, like where
let's leave some time for our audience to guess,
yes,
because
yeah,
you already told me what you did, so it would be dishonest of me to guess.
okay, yeah. Um, he said, "Don't use the word HubSpot." That's what he said, right? And that's what we do in marketing. It's like, oh, this is hard, but we'll just piggyback off of, the trust in HubSpot that like everybody's moving to HubSpot. We don't actually need to dig into like and do the work of people, like how they understand it. We'll just like get the leads that people are moving to HubSpot. We'll just say we sell HubSpot. And this actively happened to me this week, where this issue, when I talk about like understanding how to frame so that people can understand, right? So I'm in an active HubSpot engagement right now for the purposes of unified customer view and unifying data. But since it's a HubSpot project, there's research being done into a personalized, customized LLM specific for the business, so that everybody can access the same AI, the same context to help them do their jobs, right? Which happens to be the actual reason why we're doing the HubSpot project. But because those two things aren't being connected, because HubSpot is the sales and marketing system, I guarantee that's what's happening in the situation. Right. It's not the foundational AI support structure for my business.
Right.
That
business. It's not the business context. It's not the warehouser of all data about customers, process, etc.
Right. And if I'm in that situation, like what's being created is the situation I'm seeing is, as a business owner, I need to use AI. I gotta figure this AI thing out. Like what types of projects, or what do I need to do for my business, right, to start leveraging AI, right? And I'm sure what's popping up is some kind of SaaS product that's saying like, optimize AI for your business, right? And here's this personalized solution that brings in all the business context, like, right? And it's not related to anything else when I think of sales or marketing or all that stuff, right? So it's been very interesting to see that happen real time. And since I'm a part of the active conversation already, it's easy to bring those conversations together and start to connect those dots. But if I'm not, there's no hope of me connecting the value prop of AI native transformation to that person's like problem,
Right.
right? So they don't get to research on, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic happening right now. But that's when Claude says, "Don't use the word HubSpot."
Right.
It's like,
The
yeah, that makes sense. But how in the world do you connect? Like, they got to get HubSpot, right? It just,
yeah.
it's
How
a,
do I ask specific questions without being specific? Yeah. Yeah. I mean that
right.
it would be interesting to try that out in larger and multiple contexts to see because the source data is still the training data is still going to say HubSpot, and so it may be saying every time I say Snickerdoodle, just assume I mean HubSpot and
Well,
see if
he
that
gave
works.
me
But
that.
otherwise, it's just not going to get anything out of the relevant out of the training data. You're going to have everything in context, but context still
Well,
says
that's the key.
HubSpot unless
Like,
you find a replace Snickerdoodle.
well, that's the thing. Like, right, trying to create situations, and I still think this ties in with the conversation that we're having. Like, you're trying to control the context. Like, once you hook, right, you don't try not to distract them, right? That's why, like, oh, we could put this hour-long explainer on YouTube because we don't have video hosting ourselves and we can't send that via email. But then if they go to YouTube to watch it, then they're going to see all of our competitors or all these other
Right.
alternatives. And so we can't let them do that there. So let's just have them call us and we can get in a conversation, right? This gap of like giving people what they need in this moment of research, right?
Yeah. I mean,
It's just
and
so
there's
important.
we've highlighted both that chat models can really help people during the research phase and that there are these traps here, right? That people can fall into. And there's some like understanding of how those models work, what they're good at, how shaping context produces better outcomes. Like I've had a few people just in the last week, not in terms of software, but in other contexts that I've been, you know, coaching or trying to coach on AI who, who've presented ChatGPT in this case with like, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve. Here are my constraints. What are my options? It provides some options, all of which exist. They aren't hallucinations. And then the person, this pattern happened multiple times within the last week, looked at the top recommendation and was like, okay, I want to drill down on that in get more information, but it is not the kind of stuff that is in ChatGPT's training data. It's great to link out, go to the website and look that information up there. And so did essentially that. It was also other sources. And it was like, oh, this business is closed or product is now a different thing. Those recommendations were all no longer relevant for one way or another. They were, by all measures of achieving the desired outcome, off the table. And that's like a LLM literacy, kind of challenge. So it's not the chat models are not a solution in and of themselves for cases like that, and the one that you demonstrated here to solving that research barrier, enabling your prospective customers during research. And GEO or AEO is, I think, actually kind of a boring topic, and we definitely don't have time to get into it here, or ideally the expertise to talk about it. Different subject, but that's not an answer alone to this challenge. That's why you need to understand what your prospective customers, what do they want to know during research? The people who get through the gauntlet of your sales and marketing process, what were they asking during that stage? Where did they go? And then how can you facilitate or augment or empower those patterns and the things that you learn to help more people, right? When I conduct the Learn Who interviews with people to try to develop audience profiles, we try to get at that by asking, when you were first kind of exploring whether or not this was right for you and you first heard of us, like what were the things that you didn't know or feel like you didn't trust or didn't understand? And of course, that's biased, right? Like by their memory and how, just by their memory generally, but also the time between when that happened and when you're asking the question, all kinds of other factors. But hearing from people, oh, I didn't even know that you were in this business because of the brand name or because you call it, you know, you tried to create a category and so you call it snickerdoodle and everybody else calls it chocolate chip. And once I figured out you're actually the same thing or you're 80% the same thing or whatever, then I was like, oh, perfect. Like we'll use this. It seems to fit really well, but I didn't understand. Or I just had no idea how this worked or whatever those questions are. If you don't have those things, you're just blindfolded and throwing darts at a dartboard that may not be there, trying to answer these questions for people or build scaffolding to support that research stage.
Right. And that's where like even me, who's like in it and trying to solve this problem, I needed that exchange with Claude to connect the dots of like out loud. I've been saying like, yeah, unified views are great. I get to explain HubSpot without explaining HubSpot, right? I don't have to use the word HubSpot. I'm showing HubSpot, like HubSpot's still involved, but since I can say unified customer view, it keeps the conversation within the context that I think is most valuable, for the team on the other side that really needs to understand how they can solve long-standing business problems like unifying data and cleaning data and data literacy even without saying, oh, we're just going to buy HubSpot and it's going to implement HubSpot and HubSpot's going to do this and this, right? That's where we've been for 25 years. And
right,
like, even though that's been working, I still I needed that exchange to start to connect these dots, like, because the infrastructure is already built, because I've spent the last 6 months, okay, what else can we call HubSpot, right? Customer platform was a category, like they tried to separate themselves from it was CRM, right? And everybody has an idea of what CRM is, and it's not 6 hubs that can handle your entire business, right? But if I want to introduce something like customer value platform and nobody knows what the hell customer value platform has never existed before, right? But connecting these dots, it starts to create the path where, in this case, at least, here's all the use cases, and you start to be able to connect these problems. And that the fact is we're trying to help you embrace the complexity of the situation here while simplifying in the right spot, right? And the simplification is these stages, right? Like every human being ever has a researcher phase, or they're trying to understand what the problem is, right? And it doesn't matter what business you're in, you have to solve for that point in time at some point, right? And so I'm curious here, because I don't think you've seen this slide probably. Red flags creating friction versus green flags to enable the value flow of somebody on this journey. Anything jump out to you as far as challenges or easy opportunities that businesses should be?
Ooh, challenges are easy opportunities. Um, like you're right. I haven't seen this before. I think categorically you're on point with these. Um, the what challenges and easy opportunities are, in my opinion, highly context driven. Right, like how you might apply these things is extremely dependent on the delivery to the customer, who the customer is, what you do, and so on. But the some of the I'll gloss over some of the detail here, but I will point out when I talk about these things, particularly like in Who First, this model for what constitutes a high friction purchase decision, and most of the factors apply to or can be understood in the context of any purchase decision. So let's take this all the way down and talk about these red flags and green flags in a scenario that makes almost no sense to talk about a value path until we do, and then it will make a lot of sense, which is a decision that you would think takes almost no research. Toothpaste. So if you just buy the same toothpaste on subscription from Amazon or go into a store and just pick the one that looks familiar, you know, that's just a routine buying decision. But if you or if one goes to Amazon, or let's take the example of audience to research standing in the aisle of a, you know, big box store or a supermarket, you're looking at an entire aisle, top to bottom, of toothpastes from major brands, small brands, with all kinds of features, right? There's fresh breath, there's whitening, there's, you know, whatever those like, I've seen ads for like rapid bright, something like that, whitening. They have all of these different features. And then of course it's
3D,
like
3D whitening,
3D.
however
Is
that
it a
works.
paste? Is it a gel? What does it taste like? Is it for children, right? Like, okay, no, I'm going to ignore children. I don't need to look at that section because I'm buying for myself. Whatever, right? Is there a brand that I am drawn to for whatever reason? Affinity. It's what I've always used. Things like that. Standing in the aisle, we're probably in the audience stage, right? There's conservatively 50 options staring you in the face, and every single one of them has some small slice of attention. When I have a pain point in my mind, I'm thinking about being more aggressive about whitening with my toothpaste. When I narrow in on a box and am reading about its features, 50% whiter in 2 weeks, and another one says whiter in 4 days, and I'm just flipping between the two. I'm in research stage. I'm trying to understand, well, what's the difference between these two? Does whiter in 4 days, is it the same thing? I might pick it up and look at the bullet points. I might flip it over and look at the ingredients. I might look at the, you know, illustration of how much whiter it makes the false teeth, fake false teeth on the back, like we see in every commercial, right? Like I am starting to orient and trying to figure out, like, what does this do? Is it different than the other product, right? And and then I am maybe putting it back and going back to what I got last time if I'm unconvinced, or if I realize like, oh, they all have the same ingredients, and so, you know, it's just different framing, so I'll just get whatever. I'll get the cheapest thing that I always get. Those like honest comparative analysis, right? I'm looking for that among when I am weighing my short list. Evidence and proof points. You know, maybe I trust photos of those fake teeth that have been cleaned with the toothpaste,
Well,
who
clearly I
maybe I
trust the
do
9 out of 10
dentists,
dentists
right, who appear
recommend.
to recommend everything. Um, that's our expert accessibility, right? Like comprehensive resources. Is it explaining why and how it's different, right? Like these, I think, products are regulated, right? So like nobody's, and they don't want me to die, so nobody's putting bleach in them. So like the actual like constraints are fairly narrow for what's in there. The red flags, right? Like the premature sales engagement. This is not a B2B sale, and I don't have to take action. But
I think
you know,
I think we can
if
hit it though.
there's
Uh, like
the security cases,
toothpaste, or the toothpaste is not right at the door, right?
sure,
Like, because at like when I'm walking in, like I've not proven to you that I'm interested in toothpaste at this
right,
point, um, or like getting direct mailers about toothpaste. Like,
right, or
that's
door
a
to door
like if
toothpaste sales,
right if I'm not interested, the only outcome is that I'm not going to like your brand usually, like because you're annoying
right?
me or I'm having to throw stuff away, being wasteful, like all this
Yeah,
stuff. And like I've got some thoughts here. Like comparison avoidance, right? Like
yeah,
imagine if these toothpaste brands were making decisions as if they were the only one in the toothpaste aisle. Like, oh, we don't like, they're not going to know about those other ones, so we're not going to tell them. Like, businesses, like, that's what AI provides. And by the way, like, content wise, if you don't want to worry about the complexity and you just want to get started, they ask you answer as a content strategy serves
yeah,
all of this stuff, right? Which, and really at the end of the day, it just be transparent about the information related to your business.
mm-hmm.
But imagine if like a company were to say, oh, let's pretend, let's try to control the fact that we have 50 other competitors and people are going to be walking out and they could see everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Surface level information, right? I think it should resonate a lot. Like there's been a huge movement about what ingredients are in the thing and are they going to be harmful, right? So the certain companies, they're not going to change their processes to get rid of those ingredients. So they might focus on the flashy attention getting like placement in the aisle, like all these
Yeah,
things that lead to the price conscious buyers or people don't necessarily care about that stuff, right? Versus, the folks that are trying to, and the kind of toothpaste I buy, right, is about, the ingredients in it and things like that, to the point where now you mentioned bullets, but looking at the ingredients list, I'll just take a quick picture, give it to AI
yep,
real quick. Like I'll have a great understanding of that thing that I'm concerned about. So even no matter how small the ingredients print are, I
right.
can get, if that's the problem, you can't hide like the bad ingredients,
Yeah,
right?
or if we're comparing even if we aren't, if we're not talking about a a malfeasance scenario, the movement for natural and organic products in
Mm-hmm.
like let's go one aisle over and talk about deodorant, for example, um, the or soaps or anything like that. Not that these I'm not criticizing whatever chemical ingredients, whatever that means. But there are a lot of brands that position on these a differentiator of natural or organic ingredients, and the they make that a strength, right, in their competition. And so, like they're willing to go head to head and say, yeah, look at our ingredients list, and you can read and pronounce them all, and there's five versus some other product, and there's a lot of PHYLs in all of these, and you can't pronounce a single one of them, right? The whether whatever the underlying science to that is there is like an affinity, there's an identity basis to that, and you know that is part of the research, right? Like research is, I am interested in this dimension of this purchase decision, and I'm trying to figure out, do you fit it before I am willing to call somebody over to unlock the case for me to get the thing out, which is premature sales engagement. I can't read the ingredients until I get somebody to come over for me to choose between two, or before I'll throw it in my cart, even, right? That this audience to researcher to hand raiser, like we can translate it all the way down to deodorant and toothpaste, right? Like that's the value path is like a human experience within the context of a commerce decision, and recognizing how your audience experiences that is the first step to serving them better.
Yeah. And imagine if everybody that needed something to be purchased in a grocery store thought that they could control like the path of us as buyers through the grocery store, which doors we come in, which aisles we go
Right.
down that day, which day of the week, like
We'll
all
show
of
you the
these
price
things.
after you put it in your cart.
Right. Like it's crazy, and it's just as crazy like in B2B now because AI is right there to give all these answers, and it doesn't have to be accurate answers. Right? This is so fun. The cost and price, like, are we showing that on the website or not, conversations, right? Like, and this didn't even need AI. You could go Google like what's the price of this thing, and you might find competitors talking about the price. You might find secondary market pricing. Like, these systems will give an answer, and you want it to be yours, right?
Yes.
You want to be included and own that narrative, and you cannot own the narrative if everybody can only get the narrative from the mouth of a human, right?
Right.
So once you let go of that control, like this is not a system of control that we're helping you with. It's creating the space overall to support the buyer. So as we wrap, like create the conditions for comprehensive learning, right? Enable evidence-based evaluation, enable systematic learning, and then be there to recognize what's happening. The stuff that's happening in HubSpot right now with signals, right, and intent. If you configure HubSpot properly, you can watch for increased engagement with technical content and questions about implementation specifics.
Yeah.
You got to
If you are
have this
also
stuff
there
first,
providing
though.
those things, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Like if you have the content and questions, and so much of this, especially in technical spaces and high friction purchase decisions, it's like, oh, that's too complex. Let's just hook them. Let's just get the lead, and then we'll give them the sales. Right.
Yeah. Yep. And this is, I agree with all of these bullet points. I will add from when we layer on and we're, this will be short because we're trying to wrap here at time. When we layer on a better understanding of who our audience is, which is, who first audience profiles, the like brand and affinity content is also appropriate here, and is absolutely useful and enabling in the research phase as well. You just have to understand that and break that down, like we did with the toothpaste example, right? Is that the pure information aspect of research is highly relevant, but the research stage can also be engaging and entertaining videos, not just technical information videos, and showing how or interpreting how some of that, the technical and deep research or deep learning sort of resources and experiences for people align with the identity and affinity aspect, right? Like flipping over the toothpaste example or the deodorant example of there's 5 ingredients and you recognize them all. That is like deep technical information, if you will, but we are helping contextualize and interpret that and connect it to I want this kind of purchase for my body, right? Sort of
Yeah.
decisions. That's don't sleep on that in the research stage.
Yeah. No, at the end of the day, like you cannot enable and empower other people if you do not know who they are. Like, so, and it sounds like a challenge. It is a challenge, especially if you have like, if you don't already know who they are and where to find them. But this is what we're trying to like, you don't have to get lucky either, right? Like you can take these steps to start to understand. And the moment you start creating content and experiences from this perspective, you can start getting the signals in that you need and then process them in a way that's actually going to help you understand what's happening.
Yep.
Right. Again, the value path is about understanding who they are and where they are in their journey. Right. And if we can nail that down, now we can always bring contextual, relevant, timely conversations, right, to help them move down their journey. I'm excited to keep moving down this journey with you, Mr. Oakes.
Yes.
So join us next week when we'll be talking about hand raiser stage. Or you can come hang out with us in Value First office hours every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. At this time, actually, I'm jumping over there if you're interested in learning more. Free for the time being. Love to have you. But until next time, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.